Hello guys and welcome to another video. Today in this video I will be discussing PBT files, the file format that Core uses to store templates that user saves in their created games. This video is intended for people who either want to learn more about how Core works or about how to make things that generate PBT files for things such as model importers or stuff of that format. So what is a PBT file? A PBT file is the file format which Core uses to store templates for their game engine, for the Core game engine. So this template here is a PBT file that's being stored, and that's how it stores the data about it. And where you can find these PBT files, if you go to your Documents folder, you go to the My Games, Core, Saved, Maps, in the map name, then you can go to Data, say this, Templates. You have the template here for the PBT file. You can open it up in Notepad, and this is what it looks like. And as you can see, it is fully human readable. You can look at this and understand what most of it is probably. You can modify this and just most likely be able to do stuff with it. It's all very easy to modify as well. Like, for example, scale. You know what scale is. It's how big it is. So positions and other things you can add in. You can add in position if it's already in there, etc., etc. And so I think that kind of covers the basis of what a PBT file is, but I'm assuming most of you already know that. So how do they actually work and how can you generate them? So how does a PBT file work? A PBT file stores everything within the assets upper block here. So all the data.pbt file is stored between this opening bracket and this closing bracket. We have the template ID, which is the unique. Remember, unique. This has to be unique, otherwise our will break. So this is the unique identifier for the template. There is the name, which is the template name. Platform asset type is 5, which means it's a template, user generated template. The rest of the information about the template is stored within the template asset block. From here to here. Other than the serialization person, that is. We'll get to that later. So all the objects that are stored within the template are stored in the object block. The object block contains information about the hierarchical makeup of the template. So like what objects are, what are the IDs of the objects, and all that information. The root ID is the parent of the object. So for the group, it would be this, the ID of this, or it would be the ID of the only, if it's a single object template, it would be the ID of that. Otherwise, it would be the ID of the root object. I mean, same object cases, but it's the highest level of object in the template. That's why it's called the root. And then each object is stored in its own objects block. It's weird why it's called objects, not object. That's how it should be called, but it's plural for some reason. As you can see here, each one is in its own objects block. So it has its own ID, and this is going to be the hierarchical ID, which in this case is the same as the root ID for this object because it's the top level object here. But here, for example, it's a different object. So it's different from the root ID because it's not the root object. And this, however, is the root ID because it is the top level object. It's the group here. This is the name of the object, how it appears. This is the transform. You have scale. You also have parameters optional position. Should be X, Y, and Z, whatever, typing them. And then you also have the optional parameter of rotation. The important thing to note is that this is in pitch, yaw, and wall. The parent ID, I don't know what this corresponds to when it's the root object. I think it's just a random ID. I may be wrong though, but I think just having random ID for it should work. The collidable, visible, and camera collidable properties are all going to be enums. So you have the MC equalization setting, and we put in different values in here. I guess this one as well. It's a bit different though. It's different enum. You can't copy paste this there. So this part is where it gets different for each of them. So this is a cube, so it's going to be a core mesh. You have information corresponding to the core mesh object type, such as the mesh asset, which we'll get into in a minute. I did do some stuff here. Let me reset this back. I was in a default. So this corresponds to the assets block that has the same ID. So we want to make sure that these have the same ID. There is teams, which is team collision info, and maybe some other stuff. I don't know what else can go in there, but could be possibly some other stuff that may go in there as well. And static mesh, which is a subset of core mesh. I mean, I think core mesh or static mesh is a superset of core mesh. I don't know, but point is that we just have properties for static mesh inside of here. I guess we can look into the docs and see whether it's a superset or subset. It's a core mesh. Okay, so it's a type of core mesh. So it's in here. It's a superset of core mesh. So we have some other properties that go specifically with static mesh inside of here. And for example, here, which is the group template, we also have properties for, we don't have properties for core mesh, we have properties for folder. So if it's a group, you have is group, otherwise you would have is file partition if you want to be a folder. And then you have, talk about parent IDs and child IDs a bit more. These are pretty self-explanatory, but just wanted to make sure that everyone knows about them. So this is the parent group here, right? So in this template, it is this group. So this is its ID here. And then it has these child IDs, 637 and 469. So 637 is the same ID as this object, which means that this object is a child of this object. And to confirm, this object has a parent ID of this object. It also happens to be the root ID because this is the top level object here. It's the root object. And this child ID corresponds to this, and this parent ID corresponds to this. So let's go back to the simpler one. If you go back to the core mesh, you will see that it has the ID here. Now this isn't the ID of the actual mesh itself, it's the ID of the asset info. So this 1209 blah, blah, is the same ID as here. This can be whatever number you want as long as this number is the same. I mean, all IDs here are these as well. This ID can be anything you want as long as it is unique. These IDs can be whatever you want as long as they're unique and there's no other assets sharing the same IDs. Same with the root ID. RCs have to be the same, but they can be whatever you want, assuming they both match up. And so you can have these be whatever you want. Set it for here. Can these match up? The name of the asset and some other stuff, but primary thing to worry about is the asset ID. So if you want to have a different mesh type or something, you would just change what's in here, and that will make it a different type of mesh. So we can have different IDs here. If you want to have another type of object, you would just use this. and have a different type of object here, make it a something else. I don't know what you have it, but that's how it is. And then primary asset ID, I don't know what this does. I just like to ignore this, pretend it doesn't exist. And then serialization version is I'm not sure if it's the actual version of the engine, but every time there's an engine update, this would go up, and once it's saved again. So basically, the lower this is, the older engine version this is. I probably wouldn't play around with this too much. It's fine if you leave that low number. I probably wouldn't want to set it to 200 or something. That might break stuff. So let's talk about generating PBTs now with code. So if you want to generate PBT files, luckily I have a library that I made on GitHub that is pretty simple. It's not really super powerful. It only does super basic stuff. But its primary purpose is to show how you can generate PBT files. So obviously I didn't want to make a super big library because it's time consuming, plus no one will be using it, and it's most likely easier to just make your own library or functions for your niche use case. So this is pretty simple in JavaScript. There's also a Python version, and the main way it works is that it just has different functions. So this gets all the objects, single PBT file, in PBT string. Says objects equals ID's object ID, object name, blah, blah. Pretty simple. Parent ID is just a root ID. So obviously this doesn't support having meshes that shoot into other meshes and all that, but there has to be a simple explanation or example of how you can do this. If you want a more, I guess, real world use case of this, you can look at the OBJ to PBT converter that a few others and I worked on. This allows you to convert OBJ models to PBT files. So there's all this stuff here which doesn't correspond to PBT generation, just math and stuff. And there's more math and other stuff in here. And this is more math in here and blah, blah, blah. But if you want to focus on PBT generation, this is the file you want to look at. This is pretty similar to this, but it's been modified for the niche use case. And it's pretty similar, other than the generating PBT being explained to the object class, which was mainly just for some, not really any real purpose other than design. And it has a few different things here, and it's still pretty simple. And obviously folder class, which is once again pretty simple. It has its generate PBT function and all that. Once again, it's just extension and showing how you can have a slightly more complex system for it for a niche use case. And you probably create your own version if you have your own niche use case. But it's pretty simple. Just open the PBT file you're trying to achieve, look at how it works, change a few things around, and give it a few times of trial and error, getting a few error messages that don't make any sense from core, and then eventually, sooner or later, it will work. So I have to keep playing around with it and make a pretty cool thing with PBT files. This video kind of helped explain, give a very basic overview of how PBT files work on core. And if you like this video, please consider joining our Discord. Hop out there if you need any help. Yeah, thanks for watching and have a great day.